time?
No
Ozcat
kidding.
Radio. We are live. We are live with DCAT, live with Ozcat, 89.5 FM.
Surely not in my career in regular pharmacology, such a dichotomy between government and economics and morality and people being concerned. And studies done recently here in California replicated the rest of the world. For instance, a study done recently in Southern California, multiple sclerosis patients might feel quite better, and similar nerve disease. There are just lots of things going on, and I try to get them together and present them to my patients as best I can.
It's amazing because it sort of has that sort of cachet that it's just this hippie thing, or it's just people. I've heard people make the case, in fact, at a town council, an official thing, somebody said, well, look, these people they can get a card for something like headaches. And I thought, like, yeah, have you ever suffered from chronic headaches? It's a big deal if you're the one.
There's headaches, and I can tell you, as long as I've been doing this, I have not one patient who's come in and just said, I have a headache.
Right.
Most of the patients with headaches are migraines, and these can be really incapacitating. We're talking about blurry vision, nausea, a headache that means you have to stop.
You have to stay home.
Exactly. You go home, and the only thing that ends it for most folks seems to be sleep. Most patients I've seen have tried numerous medications.
And what do they say? What when they try that, when they smoke or ingest the cannabis for that, what are the results that they are reporting to you?
In general, patients do pretty well, sometimes extraordinarily well. I can tell you I worked at a major university headache clinic back when I was doing a fellowship. And I can tell you, I would give people 4 or 5 different medicines. Take one if you feel it's coming on, take one to prevent it. And I never saw a person totally headache-free. I would say, since I've been taking care of marijuana patients, I've seen about 20 patients headache-free. They monitor the sativa content. We discuss various ways to take it. So it is possible. It's complicated. It's got 421 different alkaloids, okay? You can debate the number with the metabolites.
It's a big, complex molecule of stuff.
It's something of plant origin, and by definition, anything of plant origin is going to be really complicated. But the more we learn about, the more that people can use it. The biggest obstacles are more legal economic.
One of the things that I find really receptors being stimulated, and I've heard that cannabis is the only molecule that fits this system we have already in place. Is that true?
As far as I know, I mean, people are making synthetic, what they call agonists, to try and stimulate certain receptors. But receptor theory is awfully complex. In general, it was some years ago, people talked about CBD1 and CBD2 receptors. Okay. And they said 2 was doing something to the immune system, but they didn't know what. And CB1 was helping with the appetite and the nausea and all the gastrointestinal symptoms. Well, surprise, surprise, I had the great honor of speaking at an AIDS luncheon yesterday. And of course, they wanted to know what's new. And
speaking of AIDS, it is AIDS Awareness Month, and the first was National AIDS Awareness Day.
And that's why I spoke. And it's very exciting to be able to tell that the CBD2 receptor has been identified by folks at Mount Sinai University, and this in the past several months in March, to have what looks like an effect where the cannabinoid, the marijuana, can increase the ability of the cell, probably late in the development of AIDS, to be more resistant to additional viral infection. Now, is this certain in the human?
Is anything?
And the people who developed it said that they had to work on developing a traditional drug, mainly because physicians were resistant to prescribing marijuana because of its alleged side effects.
And people also, they want a patent for it so they can sell it.
Oh, you said it, my dear.
I mean...
It is true.
That's what I've heard. People say, well, that big pharma won't touch this stuff because, or the research doesn't get done because they can't patent a plant. But Monsanto patents plants all the time.
Okay, Monsanto, for instance, in the lentil, the way that I heard this was that they changed certain of the chemistry and patented basically the DNA of the plant. if a drug is going to be developed and people are going to make money off it, usually it needs to be patented. I ran a practice for many years down in Southern California in San Diego, where I used virtually entirely non-patentable substances.
Are we talking herbs and things like that?
Not necessarily. We're also talking
Foods?
things like fish oil and flax oil, and we're talking substances like amino acids, vitamins, minerals.
Real building blocks of stuff.
Yes, and it seems that a tremendous amount of the things that we label, at least as mental illness, may be genetic differentials in the ways that people handle these substances. So going back to the marijuana, it's tremendously complex. You can't patent a plant, and I mean, if you change it, how would you change it?
Right.
People have been trying to extract portions from it, like they did with Marinol. But in general, the extracted portions have not had the global results that the plant has.
And then meanwhile, you got the kids out on these indoor grows and farms developing strains, and it's sort of like the development is happening in these sort of, you know, fringe, really.
Well, talking about kids, it's very interesting. Most of the patients who see me, first of all, are older folks with real bona fide disease and suffering in all the jobs I've had as a physician. It's hard to describe more.
So the myth of someone coming in and trying to get one over on you and just saying that they just want to smoke.
That's what other doctors told me this was going to be like, and that's dead wrong as far as I can tell. The folks who I see are good, honest, decent folks who are trying to keep their life together, who are trying to continue working, who have unspeakable pain and unspeakable symptoms. But before we go farther, I must correct you on one thing. I've heard you mention smoking several times. And at this point, I don't recommend smoking, because there's some arguments in the medical journals about smoking marijuana being part of emphysema, being part of, I hate the word cancer, but some neck and throat things. Vaporizing, as a matter of fact, the research was done right here at the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine. Vaporizing is a very effective way of delivering the marijuana to the body, and simply does not have the secondary effects of the heavy tars that people get when they smoke.
Got it. And then also there's ingesting, there's so-called edibles, or
edibles are lovely.
Oil, or
edibles, tinctures. Edibles, a lot of people think they're brand new. They've been used in Europe since the 20s.
Alice B. Toklas was the...
The first recorded use of them known to me was Alice B. Toklas and Gertrude Stein giving them to Ernest Hemingway. That's kind of the way it comes out in A Movable Feast.
Well, I know my grandmother, who died a couple of years ago, would give them to her husband Charlie when he had cancer. She lived on in Hawaiian Islands, and she would bake pot cookies. I mean, they said pot back there, so that's why I'm using the word. I know it's cannabis or marijuana. They would bake the cannabis cookies, and that's how he would went through his cancer back, 20, 30 years ago.
I am touched to learn the lore of it and the tradition of it.
Yes.
Most of the people I see tell me that they thought this was recreation back in the 60s, and they never would have believed that now they needed to function.
Right.
In the 60s, I talked to people who did have parents, grandparents who gave it to each other for cancer chemotherapy, for the secondary effects been shown to work with a variety of therapies. So there is a lore, there is a history, and in this region, I hear it from patients.
I was just reading about cannabis poultices that were used by the South American and Central American Indians. They would use cannabis poultices for various things.
Cannabis is a wonderful transdermal drug, a drug that gets across the skin. It's lipophilic, which is a fancy medical way of saying
it goes through the oily
the fat in your skin. And very often I find patients who are post-operative or who have lesions that are somehow closer to the skin. There's a lot of way of doing it transdermally, from the alcohols that were used in the 60s to now perhaps some more soothing oils, to a variety of recipes.
I love it. We've been using a cannabis-infused coconut oil in our household, and we found it's been effective for so many things, from eczema. And this is just anecdotal. This is just really anecdotal. We're not making recommendations. We're just talking. I just, in fact, I wanted some right now. My mother has been using it for her arthritis in her hips, and she's become an advocate for it. Now she likes to tell people, I use it too. And it's true. It's not your grandmother. There are different ways people are taking it. There are different ways it's being prescribed.
Prescribed, no.
I wrote proscribed or
right.
Directed. But what
all I can do is recommend, and I've got to echo what you said. This is not a general recommendation. Every patient is different. Every patient has different concerns, and yes. I talk to every patient. However,
we're just talking about what is out there.
Exactly. But I do have many patients who like different transdermal routes, look for different recipes, and there's some patients who just say, well, it's too complicated or it's too expensive, and I tell them, heck, you know, the marijuana butter, just rub the darn butter in your skin, it'll get in there one way or another.
And you know what else? It's wonderful for your skin. I'll tell you, if the beauty industry, well, they use that, hemp is used in beauty products. Yes. But if they ever really caught on to how effective the cannabinoids were for your skin, that might be the revolution.
Both the hemp plant itself, which has very low level of cannabinoids, and the cannabis plant that is raised for pharmaceuticals, have tremendous history, thousands of years of safety, multiple uses. You were not wrong when you said you can't make money off of medication unless it's patented, and people are working feverishly to try to isolate parts of this that can be patented, but so far from everything I've seen, nothing seems to work as well as the whole
thing. You know, that's what they always say about nutrition, though, like, instead of trying to distill vitamins out and pop in vitamins, eat whole good fruits, vegetables. Although nowadays with Monsanto on the loose, who knows what they're doing to everything.
You're talking about a good general philosophy. But if people are having a genetic predisposition to not use things as well, sometimes you need very high concentrates. So I wouldn't say anything in a pill is bad.
Right.
And talking about natural, I mean, tsunamis are dangerous and they're natural. Volcanoes and tidal waves are natural. So natural is not necessarily totally good. We have a lot of pharmaceutical knowledge, and it's not without use.
It sounds like you are really riding that line between the pharmaceutical and this kind of cannabis, which is more based, like you said, on lore and anecdotal stuff and stories.
Not anymore. We have research that is as good as anything the FDA would require.
I think the FDA does have some of their own research.
There is so much research on marijuana. Some of it is done by people from other countries, but good God, they ain't stupider than us. They know how to do research too. We have wonderful studies with large amounts of people that were done by the most rigorous research. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I mean, I didn't start as a, I'm going to do everything natural person.
I was going to ask you, what did finally compel you as a person that was in the pharmaceutical side of things to start to see the validity of some of these claims of cannabis?
Real research. I had looked at it years earlier in my career, and I said, gee, there's not anything much. This must be kids wanting to get high. But this is a worldwide phenomenon. Research is being done in many countries, and perhaps one of my favorite stories I found on the internet, in Israel, in the Holy Land, they have whole facilities full of Holocaust survivors to whom they're offering cannabis.
Oh, wow.
And there the government has really stepped back, and they have the government with their assisting in validation, running quite a large farm for cannabis. Tikkun Olam, the healing of the world, is the tradition there.
That's
and
what they call it in
part of it.
That's what they call it in the Rastas, the Rastafarians. They call it the healing of the nation. And I always say, like, why would they use a phrase so huge, so big for a plant unless it really was something special? There's not many plants that you would call the healing of the nation, the healing of the earth, the healing of the land.
The tradition is very ancient, the biblical references are well known, But none of this convinced me as much as solid scientific research. They do that in Israel too. I don't think they would have gone that way unless they had some very serious Weizmann Institute type researchers looking at this.
I think we have a problem in our country sometimes looking at the research because people sort of have this poo-pooing of science, so we think it's all mumbo jumbo instead of being able to distill out what is a good study and what is a bogus study. How do we, know when we're looking at real research and when we are looking at manipulated statistics or some such.
Sometimes you can't tell, and it is true that there's more manipulated statistics and things like that now with financial pressures. I'm not going to cast the first stone and throw it at people.
Right.
But nevertheless,
we're here for positivity. We're here for the positive side of it.
I can tell people, look at that, that's one good research study, because I spent half my life learning how to figure out what I think is a search for truth. Science and research are a search for truth, and I think that I'm on the cusp of it, and that's why I do what I do.
That's beautiful. I think a lot of people have lost sight of that in the scientific community. Because they're bought out by commercial institutions. Well, we're getting a signal to wrap it up. But Dr. Estelle, you are going to come back and we're going to have more of these great conversations about medical cannabis, about medicine and science in general, because you have such a great body of work. I know we have so much more to get into. Thank you so much for coming to Ozcat.
You are very welcome. It is my honor and my pleasure. Vallejo is a wonderful, enthusiastic community, and I want to share all I can.
Well, we're lucky to have you. Thank you, Wade and Patricia, for coming down. Thank you, VCAT. Let's get in. I'm going to put on a track I started putting on earlier. This is Ziggy Marley featuring Woody Harrelson with Wild and Free. Which I think is a phrase you just used a moment ago.